As Eddie Jones said, for about the last 2.5 years of his reign as England head coach, judge me on the World Cup, mate. Judge me on the World Cup. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing on this video right now, Eddie. I'm judging you on the World Cup. Not just you, but Australian rugby in general. This is the Australia Rugby report card following the 2023 Rugby World Cup. I'll give them a mark out of 10. We'll talk about the build-up to, the performance within, and now what's next for Australian rugby. And I've kind of been waiting and biding my time to do this video because I just get the sense that there's going to be stories every single day concerning the Australian national team. I've just had to bite the bullet and do it at some point, so here we go. If I haven't already, I hope I earn your subscription on the channel. I'm Tim, this is Egg Chasers. Leave your comments down below on what you make of Australia, what the future looks like for them. Believe me, I take no pleasure in how poor Australia have been and are currently, and how bleak the future looks. I want a strong Australian national team. It's important for the sport, and as we will talk about. And give the video a thumbs up. That also really helps spread word of the channel because it is just me. Let's get on with this one. So yeah, the worst ever World Cup performance for Australia, not getting out of the pools. It was a tricky pool with Wales and Fiji again, as it always seems to be at Rugby World Cups with those three sides. One of those very good teams had to miss out, and it was Australia this time. I do think, and this is not me coming to the defence of Eddie Jones, but the absolute dumpster fire that Australia rugby has become is, I think it's a long time coming. I don't put the blame exclusively at the, well, in fact, not even, I put it partially, but not significantly at the door of Eddie Jones. I think there's a very good argument to say that this poor performance at the World Cup was going to come whatever happened if Dave Rennie had stayed in charge. Yes, it looks in hindsight like they would have had a much better chance of getting out of the pool, but I wouldn't exclude the possibility that this was always the outcome that was coming for Australia. And I look back to the 2015 World Cup, and when they got out of the pool stages. It was England that time. Oh, don't want to talk about don't want to talk about that memory. I know how Australia fans are feeling right now because I remember 2015. England didn't get out of the pool. Australia, if you remember, got that last-minute win against Scotland in the quarterfinals, got themselves to the final, and it looked kind of respectable. That might have been the worst thing that could have happened for Rugby Australia, because the last 8 years have been terminal decline to this lowest ebb. They do say it's always darkest before the dawn, and maybe that will be the case for Australia. I'll talk more about what comes next for them, but what I will say is I think as a result, because there's so many systemic, wide-ranging, deep-rooted, long-standing issues which are going to take a long time to sort out, and I think that's part of the reason why Eddie Jones was brought in. I think now everyone at Rugby Australia, if they're lazy about this, they could just use Eddie Jones as a very convenient scapegoat. He has not covered himself in glory. His stock has definitely dropped significantly from where it was. But the blame isn't all Eddie Jones's. That said, he made some big calls ahead of this Rugby World Cup, leaving out legends like Michael Hooper, leaving out two very experienced fly halves in Bernard Foley and Quade Cooper, and that experiment backfired big time. And you just thought through that whole World Cup campaign, when the pressure came on, and again, this harks back to England in 2015, when a big team doesn't get out of the pool stages. The pressure came on, and Stuart Lancaster as head coach, fantastic coach, but he was very inexperienced at the time. The pressure came on, and you just thought you needed someone with miles on the clock to kind of go, I've got this, I know what to expect. And that's what surprised me so much about the selection, because Eddie Jones understands Rugby World Cups. He was involved in a South African winning team. He's taken his Australia team to World Cup finals. He knows what's going on. He took his England team to a World Cup final. And to make such a fundamental error, such a big roll of the dice, and backfire so spectacularly when it just looked out there like Australia needed someone with a bit of experience that could just go, right, it's all right, I'm captain of the ship, I've got my hand on the wheel, we're going that way. And all the young guys would have bought into that. But hindsight is always 2020, although that said, it's what everyone was saying, myself included on this channel, before the World Cup. So it started for Australia. Let's actually talk about the World Cup itself. They went to France. The build-up wasn't great. They had the odd decent performance in the Rugby Championship, but, you know, Wins weren't anything they got into the habit of getting. And we're not going there for croissants, mate. Well, I hope a few of the Aussie boys did actually get some croissants when they were in France, because they didn't get many victories. Started with a defeat to Fiji. That looked like a disaster at the time. Again, this is one of those things, when you look back with a bit of hindsight, you kind of go, this was a very, very good Fiji team. And almost, there's an argument to say whatever Australia team got put out, they could well have come away with that defeat. But Carter Gordon, having had all the faith put in him at fly half, it backfired. He didn't play well. The low ebb was that defeat to Wales. I was there in Lyon for that game, and Australia were absolutely abject. Wales were very good. Australia were woeful. And the cracks in that squad started to appear. They had some key injuries, some key men that were missing. It might have made the defeat not quite so big, but I mean, they were going down, and then they just limped their way to the end of the pool stages when they went home. So I would give Australia a 3 out of 10. It's as bad as it's ever been for them. Do you think that's a fair score? I did think about maybe going for a 4. I couldn't have gone higher than that, because, like I say, it looks really bad because they've been to World Cup finals, won World Cups, never not made it out of the pool stage. And that just looks dreadful. But actually, when you look at the deeper issues at Australian rugby, I think there was always an argument they were never going to get out of the pool, which is a real shame. And let's talk about some of those issues. Firstly, they need to be addressed, because what is coming down the line for Australia is a Lions tour in 2025. Bearing in mind the last Lions tour happened with no crowds in South Africa, and it just took the whole energy out of that series. The fact that no travelling fans could be there. The Lions need a good Australia, because at the minute you feel like this could just be a procession and there's not going to be any jeopardy in it. And what sort of opposition are the regional sides going to make in Australia? The midweek games could be blowouts, and the test matches could be blowouts, and that would be a disaster for the whole brand of the British and Irish Lions. So Australia have got to save these problems, not least the fact they are going to be playing against, they're going to be hosting a Rugby World Cup in 2027. When you look broader, you think, well, New Zealand desperately need a really good Australia. What is it, 40 games in a row? They haven't won a game against New Zealand. Some ridiculous stat I read. I can't remember what it is now. But, I mean, with South Africa now moving to Northern Hemisphere, and only having the Rugby Championship games, in terms of the club game, that is, moving to the Northern Hemisphere, and Rugby Championship, New Zealand desperately need good Australian Super Rugby teams and a great Australian national team. And they don't have either of those at the moment. When you look at the Super Rugby situation, and, there's so many issues with Australian rugby, and in no particular order, there's really poor grassroots funding of the game. There's been a lack of talent identification, development of players, coaching. There's been a loss of talent to rugby league. There's no third tier competition of any significant standard. Super Rugby sides have unsustainable costs and small crowds, and aren't getting to the later stages of the competition, with the exception of the Brumbies last year. So I think the question has to be asked, can Australia sustain 5 Super Rugby franchises? I would suggest no. Just based on the outcomes, I know that you want to spread it around such a big country, but is it the best thing for the national team to have 5 sides that are not very good? And would it be better to have 3 that are exceptional, concentrating the talent within those 3 sides, go into the rugby heartlands, and maybe having to retreat into the rugby hotbeds for a little bit, and just focus there and build out from there, from the grassroots up? It's a long project. I think that may be the way to go. And I look at Ireland as a comparable model for Australia to think about. Restrict things, work on the grassroots level, get the school system working, and maybe concentrate the talent into fewer teams. And if need be, with certain positions, move players around from side to side so that works. That would be my thought. The other issue is just money in general. Rugby union is struggling big time in Australia. The AFL have just signed a TV deal, I believe, that's nearly 1 billion Australian dollars versus, is that right, 30 million Australian dollars for the rugby union contract. So we're looking at, oh my goodness me, the ratio of money that AFL is getting versus Australian Rugby Union is shocking. And the same goes with the NRL. And the latest story we've had is that Mark Nwanganitawase, Marky Mark, is having his eyes turned by the Sydney Roosters, who might well be offering him a contract. I'm hoping that that is just a bargaining deal, because I believe that Nwanganitawase's contract runs out at the end of next year or during 2024, and hopefully he's just taking that meeting with a rugby league side so that he can maybe leverage a really good deal for himself, because Australian rugby need talent like that. You've got Nwanganitawase. It looks like Karevi's off to Japan, doesn't it? It looks like Korobete, is he going to be hanging up and stopping into his international rugby? It looks like the case, but they do have some talented young players like Angus Bell, like Carter Gordon, who I hope will come good, but Tate McDermott. But they need to keep hold of every bit of talent that they've got and stem the tide of players going elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, there's issues in lots of rugby countries all over the shop. It looks like some kind of centralisation and getting the stakeholders all on board and all together, because I'm hearing words that like the Brumbies aren't up for the deal that Rugby Australia are trying to put forward. And I kind of get that from the Brumbies' point of view, because they've done all right. And Rugby Australia's administration of the game has been absolutely woeful, and for a long time now as well. You have to go back a long time to think of a time when the leadership at Rugby Australia was decent in any way whatsoever. So just to return to what I said at the start, I take no pleasure whatsoever in Australia rugby being so bad. And I hope that it's less of a dumpster fire as we move forward. Tell me what you think. What is the solution? If you're from Australia, how on earth do you solve it? If you've got a thought on the subject, let me know, because I'm at a loss. And I think that exasperation is shared by a lot of Australian rugby fans. So I'd love to know what you think. Get stuck in the comments. Hit subscribe on the channel and give the video a thumbs up. I'll see you on the next one.